Now, before I talk about probably the most famous execution that took place here on Tower Green, I just want to take a few more minutes longer to point out some of the more important buildings that surround us. Over on my right hand side here, ladies and gentlemen, tucked away in the corner with the sentry guarding it outside, we have the Queen's House. Called the Queen's House because, believe it or not, it belongs to the Queen. Now, this is one of the only Tudor buildings left standing in the City of London, because the rest were all destroyed by the Great Fire in 1666. Originally it was built as a wedding present for Anne Boleyn. Sadly though, Anne never got to live there, because by the time that building was finished, so was she. It was then handed over to the officers of the Tower. Since that time we've used it to house really important prisoners. Now, Queen Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife, she was a prisoner inside that building prior to her execution, and other important prisoners have included William Penn, founder of the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. More recently, in 1941, it was also the prison to Rudolf Hess, the deputy leader of Nazi Germany. But today, ladies and gentlemen, the Queen's House has been handed over to our resident constable, who at present is General Sir Nicholas Horton. He is allowed to use the Queen's House throughout his 5-year period in charge of the Tower. On the left-hand side here, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, which means St. Peter in chains. Now, this chapel was built in the year 1519 in the reign of King Henry VIII. All the architecture you can see there, it's all pure typical Tudor architecture. Sadly though, during the 17th and 18th century, the chapel suffered greatly from many alterations and additions, until it became so bad we had to ask Queen Victoria to come and take a look at the place. Now, the flagstones that line the floor inside the church, they were so uneven at the time for all the burials that had taken place inside there. As Queen Victoria made her way along the aisle, she actually tripped and fell. And as the saying goes, she was not amused. Now, she immediately set up a royal commission to restore the chapel back to its original Tudor design. One of the tasks of that royal commission was to exhume all the bodies that lay buried beneath the floor. They were given the task of trying to identify those bodies where possible for reburial in a mass grave down inside the crypt. However, all the bodies that were exhumed from underneath the altar table inside the church, they were exhumed, correctly identified and laid to rest back in their original graves. So underneath the altar table inside our church, ladies and gentlemen, is the final resting place of Queen Anne Boleyn, Queen Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey and James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth. And if you remember that story I told you back in the Bell Tower about the Duke of Monmouth, you'll realise he's one of the few executed people buried in there, complete with his head. All in all, 1,500 bodies were removed from below the floor, but only 33 could be correctly identified. Their names are all now commemorated on a brass plaque situated inside the church. Right, now behind you there, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a big long building with a clock at the centre and soldiers from the Irish Guard standing guard outside. Now, that building, ladies and gentlemen, is known as the Waterloo Barracks. Now, the Waterloo Barracks is a relative newcomer to the Tower of London, having only been built in the year 1845, originally as a barrack block for the soldiers that were garrisoned here at the Tower, and named after the Duke of Wellington's victory at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. And in fact, all those cannons you see standing guard outside are all captured French cannons taken from the field of Waterloo. Today though, the Waterloo Barracks has been converted, and today it is the home to the Crown Jewels and the Royal Regalia. So if you wish to see the Crown Jewels, ladies and gentlemen, once we've finished here, the entrance, as you can probably see, is directly below the large golden clock. Right, now back to where we're now standing, and behind me, our private execution site. Now, there were 6 official executions took place here on Tower Green. The names of all those 6 people executed here are commemorated on the memorial behind me. The most famous one, though, our first one, Henry VIII's second wife, Queen Anne Boleyn. Now, Queen Anne was held here at the Tower for the final 18 days of her life, prior to her execution in the year 1536. She'd been tried and condemned on various crimes, such as adultery, witchcraft and incest, but so scared was she of the block and axe, she asked to be executed in the French manner, with a 2-handed sword. We even brought the executioner across from Calais in France. On the day of her execution, as Anne knelt down over there to say her final prayers, the executioner quietly and gently took the sword out from underneath a pile of straw where it had been hidden, and with one swift blow, he took her head clean off. So swift and so precise was the blow that he struck that it was said, as the executioner lifted Anne's head for the crowd to see, her eyes were still staring around at the crowd, her lips were still moving in prayer. Gone really quiet again. Right, okay. Right, ladies and gents, one more story to tell you before we let you depart and run around the tower on your own free will. And it's about us guys, the Beefeaters here. Now, we seem to cause a bit of confusion with everybody. People aren't quite sure how to take us. A lot of people think we're part of the military. We're not. We used to be, but we're not anymore. And a lot of people think we're just costume tour guides. Now, that's far from the case. Now, the history of the Yeoman Warders, or the Beefeaters here at the Tower, we go back to the year 1485, shortly after the Battle of Bosworth Field, where Henry Tudor had just defeated King Richard III in battle. Shortly after that, he was crowned King Henry VII, the start of the Tudor dynasty of kings and queens. Now, as soon as he became king, he created his own personal bodyguard. His bodyguard became known as the King's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard. And that personal bodyguard of the monarch is still in existence to this day. Today, we have a queen on our throne. So now it is the Queen's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard. And myself and all my colleagues that you see here at the Tower that wear this uniform are all part of that ceremonial bodyguard of our present-day monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. However, as bodyguards go, we're rubbish, okay? Now, we don't get to look after Her Majesty that much anymore, okay? Most of our duties today keep us confined here to the Tower, and that's all down to King Henry VIII. Now, when Henry VIII was on the throne, he didn't like the Tower of London that much. It was already nearly 400 years old by the time Henry was on the throne, and he much preferred his more luxurious palaces like Hampton Court. He realised if he left the Tower, he'd have to leave the Tower defended because it protected the old Tudor city of London. So when he left, he gave orders that 10 members of his personal guard were to remain behind, and they were to be the custodians and guardians of the Tower. And that's why we're here to this day. We're here now purely just to look after and to police the Tower. Now, in order to become a Beefeater, up until the year 1827, it would cost you a lot of money. It would cost you 250 gold guineas to purchase your position here as a Beefeater. Now, why on earth would you pay that much money to have to live here, look after loads of prisoners, and wear a uniform that's as ridiculous as this one? Well, this was a really good job, you've got to understand, because all the prisoners that they were sent here, these were rich, royal, noble, famous, and wealthy people. These were the A-lister celebrities of their day, the Kim Kardashians of the Tudor period, okay? Now, when they came here, they had to pay the Beefeaters to keep them in the lifestyle they were used to living outside the walls. So as a Beefeater here in the old days, you can make a ton of cash out of these prisoners. The only problem was, though, being financially driven like that, it didn't really attract the best person for the job. Now, 1827 came along, everything changed with an appointment of the new constable. His name, Sir Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, better known as the Iron Duke. One of the most famous British soldiers in British history. Famous because he had defeated the French Emperor Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Now, he'd been a professional soldier all his life, and he was going to run the Tower with military precision. He wasn't very happy with the Beefeaters who were here at the time, because half of them weren't here. Most of them were running pubs the other side of the river, and they were paying people just to dress up in their uniforms here inside the Tower. As you can imagine, the Duke wasn't very happy with that. He sacked a lot of them. He called in his own men, and he said from now on, the only people to be employed as Beefeaters to be gallant, deserving, and meritorious sergeants on discharge from the army. Now, that tradition, ladies and gentlemen, still continues to this day. In order to be a Beefeater here now, you must have served for a minimum of 22 years in the armed forces, retired at the rank of warrant officer or sergeant major, if you like. You must also have been awarded a long service and good conduct medal, or what we refer to as 18 years of undetected crime. Now, originally when he set up the orders, he said it would only come from gallant, deserving and meritorious sergeants on discharge from the army that could have the job. Most of us are ex-army to this day, and I'm an old soldier. I served for 22 years with the 1st Battalion of Light Infantry, but sadly, ladies and gentlemen, standards have now dropped. We do have to take people from all branches of the armed forces now. We have 5 from the Royal Air Force, 3 from the Royal Navy, and 2 from the Royal Marines. But we don't talk to them, they're really weird. Okay? It's also open to females. Ladies, you can also become Yeoman Warders, providing you served your time in the military, and it's also open to Commonwealth troops. Anybody here comes from a country where the Queen is your head of state, your troops are equally entitled to join the Queen's bodyguard as well. Now, the one question, guarantee we get asked this question every day of our lives: why are you called a Beefeater? And the answer, we don't know. It's never ever been written down, it's never been documented, and it's been lost in the mist of time. Now, lots of different theories as to why we're called Beefeaters. The most popular theory seems to go back to the Tudor period, when the kings and queens lived in the White Tower, and with their personal guards, we were given beef and beer each day to keep us big and strong. Sadly, that's no longer the case, and we've all got to go shopping at Tesco, same as everybody else in the UK now. The local Londoners in the area, they probably called us Beefeaters, jealous of the fact that we lived in a royal palace on their patch, nice uniforms, fresh rations every day, and they called us Beefeaters really just to poke fun out of us. And over the years it evolved, it became our nickname, and we're really proud of it. There's now only 33 of us that live and work here inside the tower that now have the honour to be able to call ourselves a Beefeater. Sadly, there aren't many perks to the job, apart from the fact that Beefeater Gin was named in our honour. Now, they've never paid us a single penny in copyright to use our image on the bottle, but we don't get a bad deal out of them because they always send us a bottle of gin every year on our birthday. We have loads of birthdays, don't feel sorry for us. Right, ladies and gentlemen, sadly that brings us to the end of our guided tour. 900 years of history in a very short period of time. I hope you've enjoyed it though. There is so much more for you to see here at the tower. All the buildings I've been pointing out to you, okay, you don't need your tickets, put them away, they're all open, you can go inside. Please explore some of the stories I've told you this afternoon. And if you're a little bit lost or you're not sure where to go, or you get any questions whatsoever, find a Beefeater. We're here to help you, we're dotted around the place, and we're here to look after you. So anything you want to know, speak to the guys and girls that are on duty today. Now, ladies and gents, before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. You've been a great audience. Thank you for laughing at my pathetic attempts at humour. If you have enjoyed this tour, when you go home tonight and you've got to write that review on TripAdvisor, okay, don't forget my name's Shady, and if you've really hated it, it's Andy. Thanks very much for your time, ladies and gents. Thanks very much, guys.